Expert Authority world, I am excited to present to you someone who is super down to earth, but also she might as well be a rocket scientist. I don't really know why. I she should be. I'm sorry. I'm just blown away at how impressive Carla Fowler is. She's an executive coach. She graduated magna cum laude from Brown. She helps people look, and this is what really attracted me to her, is the scientific approach to what they're doing. She loves engaging in conversation, and I think I'm a little bit nervous because I am the exact opposite of this, the antithesis. That's a word I learned. And I'm just blessed that she's here because in any other normal circumstance, like we should probably not even be talking. So I'm just super excited to bring her to you because she is one of the highest level people I've ever had on the show. And I'm going to bring her up right after we thank our sponsor. You're already the expert, but have you transformed your expertise into a tangible asset that will generate and qualify leads while increasing profit for you 24/7? And if so, how well are you promoting it? With the Expert Authority Effect publishing method, it's easier and faster than ever. Visit freebusinessbookpublishingcourse.com today to learn the 7 steps to publish and promote your nonfiction lead and profit-generating business book in 8 weeks. Visit freebusinessbookpublishingcourse.com to get started now. Once again, that's freebusinessbookpublishingcourse.com. Here she is, ladies and gentlemen, the lovely Dr. Carla Flau. I am so sorry. Here she is, ladies and gentlemen, the lovely Dr. Carla Fowler. Carla, how are you feeling today?
Mario, I am feeling great. And I am so glad that you invited me to be on your show. And you know what? I think that for a lot of us, when we think about performance and performance science, have that same feeling that you were expressing. It's that like, oh, that's the big stuff. Like, it can be intimidating. But I think part of why I love talking about it is that I think it is approachable for all of us. And I'd love to make it that way.
You are super approachable and down to earth, and I was telling you that's one of the reasons I knew you were going to be a great interview. And because even for me as the host, sometimes it's like my team and I check out people and it's like they seem cool, it should be good, don't really know. But when I saw your stuff, looked it over, I'm like, really just kind of blown away. And I think some of that's still rubbing off. I'm not really intimidated, but I'm like, you're a freaking doctor, rocket scientist, like all this. How am I? You have so many great attributes about you. I'd say in the approachability. And I'm like, this is a hook, line, and sinker. You're going to help so many people. We need to get your message out there. So thanks for making the time. It's truly an honor, and I can't wait to just dive in and ask you stuff like, why do you take the scientific approach to executive performance?
All right, well, let's dive into that. So I think part of the reason that I approach it like a scientist is because I am a scientist. I think from the time I was really young, I liked this idea that the world was solvable, that you could figure things out, that it wasn't just like, well, you're born with whatever you're born with, and that's that. And so I think even from a young age, like I remember in 5th grade, like trying to figure out how to do the shuttle run for the like presidential physical fitness test, which was like that thing where you run back and forth between 2 lines really quickly and you like pick up bean bags and you put down the bean bags. And like, I was really not very good at it. And I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. There is a solution. So I want to, yes. But I think that I went into science because I was always really curious and I wanted to learn how to think in that way. And even though now I'm focused on executive coaching, 10 years ago, I started that practice. It was a natural fit for me to bring that curiosity from science and even that scientific way of thinking into the practice. And not just for me as the coach, but also to help clients think about their life, their work in a really scientific way, to ask questions and to say, well, what if this? Or, well, what if we tried this? What if we ran this experiment?
It's a great way to look at it, and I can relate. I have nowhere near the degrees you have, but I've always taken that problem solving approach to business, to life, whether it's something simple to something complex. It's what led me to design the software I did to build WordPress websites automatically. It was like we were doing hundreds and hundreds of sites, and it was like, this seems inefficient to me. I'm sure there's a quicker way. And my brain was like, if ever there's anything you can automate, it's probably software. Like, if you can't pull it off with software, you're probably not onto something. There's certain things, and I realize physics exist in the real world, but you can get away with a lot of stuff in virtual reality. And I'm like, we got to figure this out. So we did. And why do you think not everyone takes that approach to figure out business problems? Because I believe it's also solvable also. And like when we're working with our author clients on their books, just kind of look at it as puzzle pieces. What needs to go where? I mean, you have all the answers within you.
Well, I think that there's actually a number of people go into business and become entrepreneurs are already actually thinking that way. Like, you do not have to go get some big degree in science to have that kind of mental process or that kind of approach. So I think that's actually the first thing I would say, is that entrepreneurship, running those loops of testing an idea, seeing if it lands with your market, like, is very similar to the scientific method. And so some people kind of innately get that. And you don't have to have scientific training to understand that. I think for other people, sometimes what blocks us from really approaching it with that open mindset, and I like to think of it as an experimental mindset, that gives us that openness to try something, to not worry too much if it doesn't work out the way we thought, as long as we're learning from it and then able to make some good next steps after that. But I think, for a number of people, what happens is we're kind of coming up through our early career and we're working really hard to get it right, like to get the right answer. And we are often really rewarded for that. But I think the challenge is sometimes we think like, oh, well, I need to get it all figured out before I make a move. Or I call this like, we want to know before we go. It's like saying, oh, I want to know exactly when the right opportunity is going to come around and all the things I need to do to like be in position. But I don't know if you're a surfer at all or if you've watched surfing.
I love the water.
Okay. So the thing about surfing is I think there's a lot of analogies to this idea of like how to get in position when you're like doing something entrepreneurial. You definitely want to watch the waves. You want to be paying attention. But you're sort of watching them form up, and then you got to kind of paddle around a lot to sort of figure out if you can get yourself in the right position in the lineup, if you can get yourself in the right position to catch the wave where it has the most momentum. And what I always picture is like, there's a lot of paddling involved. And sometimes you decide like, nope, not my wave. And you wait for the next one. But the idea of surfing is like, no, you just put yourself in one spot and the wave comes along perfectly. And then, you do 1, 2, 3, and then you're on it. Like, no, like that's not how the majority of surfing works.
Yeah, I can't even imagine trying to line up and be at the perfect spot. All it takes is a little bit of wind and you're off in some way, shape, or form.
Exactly.
You could miss it.
And so like, think about that applied to entrepreneurship. And so I think for some people, like, handling that uncertainty. And this is kind of one of the principles of performance science that I work with people on that I think is really helpful. It's not the first thing, but I'm going to bring it up because it is totally applicable to what we're saying now. And that's, can you learn to relish uncertainty? And I have like ways that I help people do this, but at a broad level, it's, can you embrace that like there's always some luck involved? You're not going to know how everything is going to turn out exactly. You can do your homework, and you should do some homework to figure out things that are learnable. But there's a lot of what you will need to do, which is to actually start making your move, start paddling for that wave. And then you're going to learn a lot very quickly as things approach. And you may get it, you might not, but you will have learned, and you may be in a better position for the next one. So it's this idea of that uncertainty is one of the biggest things that can block us, because as human beings, we like control. It's in our evolutionary biology.
Would you say that you can solve, what was I saying? Scared? Oh, no, uncertainty. Would you say you can solve uncertainty with information?
Great question. I think you can break up uncertainty into different parts. And so there's not a yes no answer to that. So I'm a big fan of saying of actually asking yourself before you even go do the learning or the research, ask yourself what you could know. So for example, if there are other people or colleagues, peers who are in the business you're in, maybe they're a startup CEO, right? Those could be great resources of people to talk to try and understand, like maybe they have a solution to this thing you're dealing with. You can look and see, are there books on this topic? Are there, YouTube videos at this point? You don't even need to commit to reading a book. Like
Books are
sometimes
awesome,
oh yeah, I agree. But, you know, it's identifying and thinking first, is this something that like I could know? Like, is the answer probably out there somewhere? And then if yes, then it's probably worth spending some time, look for that YouTube video, read that book, talk to a couple of respected peers that you have who might be good resources. But if you're thinking about it and your answer to that question is actually, no, this isn't really something I can know because it's very specific to the bet I'm making. And I'm making the bet because we actually don't know the answer. And we think that it might be we might be uncovering a hidden opportunity. And so by its nature, I can't know it until I start to run some experiments. And the reason I like to divide it is because if you're trying to do more research to answer something that you can't know, you're like kind of wasting a lot of time to get a feeling that you're not going to get. You're never going to get the feeling. You will never have read enough books to solve that feeling. But instead, the best way to solve that feeling is to design a good experiment. And we could talk about that and what goes into a good experiment. But
all right, I got to play devil's advocate for a hot second.
Please,
what if you just hire the person that has the answer?
Oh, I didn't say that one. Thank you for saying that. That's a great one. Like sometimes you don't need to do it, right? Sometimes what you really need is someone who has that expertise, either to be on your team or sometimes it's like, or contract it out. You don't always have to be an expert at everything.
Nowadays.
Yes.
Even if it's just for a project or whatever. So this whole time, I've been thinking about like stealth technology in aircraft. And it's like, okay, you can look up all kinds of stuff online, but you're probably not going to get the exact formula.
Mm-hmm.
So I love how you're saying do an experiment. And I highly doubt you're going to get super classified information unless you just have some real big in and you are the company building it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where the experimentation, and I love that too, because it's like, this might work, it might not. It might blow up, it might not. Don't know, don't care, but we're going to learn. Seriously.
That is a great mantra. Like, I feel like I want that soundbite that people could just play for themselves. Like when you were about to run that experiment, like to be able to have a little fun with it, or if it not fun, at least feel interested. Because I think the truth is that if our lives were all scoped out and we knew exactly what was going to be happening, even if it was really good stuff, we would be bored out of our minds. Part of the thrill of like going after something that you don't know what's going to happen is the way you feel when you accomplish it is way different than if you knew all along it was going to happen. We have a very different sense of self-efficacy, of pride, even of happiness when we are in that pursuit and when there is uncertainty that just isn't present. Like, it's like, I don't know, if you're like playing, checkers with your like 5-year-old nephew and you're like, okay, I know I'm going to win. Right? Unless you're like, I'm going to try my hardest to let him win, which is a really nice thing to do, probably.
I feel like when you were 5, you were like mastering chess.
Oh, goodness. No, I was mastering shuttle run. Remember? No.
So when you're talking about this uncertainty, you got me thinking about all kinds of stuff now. This is fantastic because one of the things I've always told people in business is if you're trying to do something, get as much leverage on it as you can. Get the right people, get as much knowledge, run the experiment. Like basically all three of what you've said. Like, I don't know the answer, but put everything, stack the deck.
Hmm.
So it helps, like, the more confident you can be in the outcome, I think that does help you. But I'm very fascinated by what you said about, like, if you know, like, honestly, it's kind of fun when you're like, yeah, we're gonna smoke everyone. This is great. We're gonna win. But at the same time, yeah, when you have that intrigue of like, I've never done this, this whole thing could blow up, but I don't care. It's fun to just go, no matter what. For me, it's fun to go, hey, let's do this. We're going to either have a breakdown or breakthrough.
Hmm.
And what I love about it, no matter what happens, most people aren't willing to do that one thing. I really don't care if it goes well or horrible, because we're going to learn something. Now I want it to go well. Even if
Of
that
course.
doesn't go well, we're going to redo it till it does go well, so we know what the heck we're talking about. But you gain that confidence, and it is intriguing when you're like, I have no clue. Let's go for it. We're at 6, 12 months from now. And I feel a lot of authors, like when we're doing books for them, it's like they don't know all the steps, but they don't need to, because that's, why you hire us. Like I said, the
Right.
right people. But
Hmm.
I can imagine building a building, building a boat, stealth technology, all of these experiments. It's like they didn't know what they were doing. They just knew we have to get to the end result. And
Yeah.
what do you think a lot of people resolve on the end solution, like commit to the outcome regardless of knowing the process?
I think what you brought up is a really important piece and distinction of what is an enjoyable state when you're walking into the unknown. And here's you brought up something really important that is another piece of it. So we talked about there is some thrill to uncertainty, but I believe we feel that thrill of uncertainty when we feel some confidence in our process. And this is why process matters very much, in addition to outcome. Now, process without outcomes, ultimately, like that doesn't really work,
It's a
right?
bad
Like if you're
process.
it's a bad process, and we don't want to keep doing that process. But I think what you're describing is this idea of saying, if you set your experiment up and you have a reason for why you think you're doing the process you're doing, so you have some clarity about why that is. If you've spent some time thinking about, like, okay, how long do we need to give ourselves, like, or what's the timeline that's getting forced on us, like how much time do we have? But when you really spend some time to think about the process and you feel good about the effort you've put into, for example, balance the upside and downside potential of like what might happen, to say, well, honestly, the upside's really great and we might not get it. But when we think about the realistic downsides, they aren't, like they're not shutting down the business, for example. Uh, that puts us in a position to be able to make the bet, I think, and feel a little more like relish that uncertainty, feel a little more of that thrill. I think where we get into trouble is when the stakes are too high, like the downside is too big. The process is not clear, or we don't feel confident about it. And then there's also then the uncertainty of outcome. And I think that as a trifecta is like when people talk about like really not liking the uncertainty, I think one or multiple of those things is true.
Yeah, I wanted to let you finish because you're awesome. But when you said when we get in trouble, it's like, yeah, when we go out as entrepreneurs and just try stuff, because most of the time it's you've jumped off the cliff and you're building the plane on the way down.
Which is an effective kind of fuel. Let me just say, it is a fuel. One of the things I definitely work with people on, though, is that burnout is really a thing we have to be careful of. And so I talk a lot about different kinds of fuel. There's sort of the clean energy. You could imagine it like the wind power, the solar. It's very renewable, doesn't have a lot of like byproducts or downsides. And then there's like coal, oil, very powerful. Like you want to get a jet across the world very quickly. Like we don't have solar power for that. Like that is, you
How
got to
big of a
use
battery would
fuel.
that take?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know, but I like to point out that there are different kinds of fuel. And I have certainly in my life used the great, I committed to something. I guess I got to deliver on that. And I'm going to have to figure it out on my way
Right?
down. Um, it is powerful energy, but you can't, in my experience, it's not great energy to rely on all the time. It's not sustainable. And sometimes we need it. I like to avoid binary statements of like, oh, never do this or always do this, because I just find that they tend to not hold as much truth as, hey, there are different kinds of fuel and there are trade-offs to using each kind of fuel, and have some versatility.
But ones and zeros are so simplistic. It's easy to figure out the yes or no answers.
I know. And that kind of brings us back to control. Like, we like to feel in control. We like that clarity. And this is actually, so when I think about performance, I think one of the most important things that we can start with as an entrepreneur, even as an executive within a company, is this idea of brutal focus. So this is another, we talked about relishing uncertainty, but I also like to talk about brutal focus. And that is because I think in coaching, two of the best things that I can help people with are having a really explicit, clear understanding of what it is they actually want, and then what is actually most important as a driver or a priority heading towards that. And that is actually where we start, like every coaching engagement that I do, is working towards having that clarity. Because what happens next is like facilitated and goes much better if we start at that point.
How would you differentiate intention to clarity?
Great question. I think that to me, intention often has a little more action associated with it. I think intention can play alongside clarity. So you can have clarity about something, and then you can have intention to say, great, so I'm going to go do X, Y, or Z next, because it links back to sort of my clear understanding of like what I want and what I think is going to help get me there. I think we can also pair intention with less clarity. So sometimes we'll do something and we will do it with the intention of it kind of tying back to a dream, but we might not have as much clarity about exactly what that dream is.
Interesting. I appreciate that. Because I know some people go, you need intention, and others like, you need clarity, you need focus, and it's like, you kind of need all of this. I don't think the secret to success is just nailing one of determination, persistence, stick to itedness, whatever you want to call it. It's like, I'd say risk aversion is a huge one. Like you got to be able to tolerate some, like, I don't know, moments. But I love how you're breaking it down, saying if you don't have the clarity, if you're uncertain, I mean, if you have all the characteristics of and you've mentioned, I don't think I haven't picked up on how you feel. You've mentioned the feeling side of this a whole lot. If you're in this state of even that trigger line, like when you're driving a car, if you're at 2,000 RPMs, you may be going, you may not, depending on what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You have to get past that point. You have to, take that jump and at some point. And if you're in uncertainty, even if you're 1 degree off, you got to get to the other side to get into the action mode. But if you're taking action without the clarity, you're going to go in circles. So I guess all of the, I'm saying all of this to say, how do you get people to navigate that point of you're in that top 10, 20%, you're taking action, and you're doing your best to avoid the pitfalls, but you're still in that confidence mode?
Yeah. Well, I think your point about you need multiple things. Like there's not just sort of one thing about performance that you max that thing and that just gets you there. And I think that's really important. And I've mentioned clarity. And I think that's one thing that I think it's easy to have either a pile of stuff to do, and you're like, oh, I have this long list of things to do, or to have a dream.
Wake up and just walk out anywhere.
Yeah, right. This is everyone, all of us. And then on the other side, we often have a dream, like, oh gosh, wouldn't it be nice if X, Y, or Z were true? But I think the missing piece is this part in the middle where we actually take the dream and say, no, like, let me really think about that. What, like when I say I want a successful business, that doesn't give us very much direction around like, okay, well, how would I work towards that? Where should I spend the bulk of my time? Like where it would help me be the most successful. Um, it also doesn't even tell us like when we're done. Like help us know if we've arrived, or at least arrived to then we can make a new dream, a new goal. And so I think it's not making a to-do list. It's not as tactical as that. And yet it is much more getting into the granular than having a dream. And so I always start there because to me, it's something we often don't ask ourselves. We intuitively think we have this sense of what it is, but because we don't, it gets much harder for us to prioritize, for us to think about where do we want to spend time. Also to think about what we need to do and what we don't need to do as compared to what we see everyone around us doing or thinking. And so
are you telling me that you don't need to keep up with the Joneses just to make them happy, even though you don't like them?
I know, shocking. It's actually, so again, part of our human biology, we were built to mimic each other. It's a part of like socially getting along. And so we were actually designed that way. Yeah. Because getting along.
Have you looked into anything with mirror neurons?
I have not done research on that myself, but I'm aware of them. And yeah, it's part of how we connect with each other and how we get along in groups. I'm going to give a very bad explanation of them, but I can if you like.
It's get along in
groups. Yeah. Well, so this is separate from whether or not we need to get along in groups now. Although often when we have a business, there inherently are groups that are important to us, which is, separate from our social time. But I think the idea is that when life was sort of much more brutal and we were all about like find food, find a mate, try to not die by death of wild animal, that getting along and collaborating and cooperating in a group mattered a lot. And that the reason why we have things like mirror neurons, which are something that allow us to sort of mimic, empathize, and even through our body language, express to someone else that we can get along, like we are safe together, we can get along. That's why those things probably exist. All hypothesis, of course, but you can imagine then going back to the Joneses, when you feel like you need to do something different, it's challenging. In fact, if we don't clearly identify what our priorities are and how they might differ, that one of the challenges is our default response will be to mimic other people, maybe without even realizing it. Like we might even just sort of think, oh, that seems like a good idea, unless we've actually kind of really thought about it.
Do you think that's why some people pick up an accent depending on who they're talking to in just different scenarios?
I think there's something to that. Yes, really? I can't know.
I wish we had more time. There's so many things I want to ask you. I've noticed people who do that, who, when I talk to them, they're like more upbeat and they're like positive. Mm-hmm. And then I'll see them at an event or whatever, and they're just, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened on the I'm like, and also years ago when I was in school, like you'd hear the people going, oh, so-and-so teacher has it out for me. I'm like, I don't have a problem with them. I actually love that class. And I was like, that's when I really first realized like what the energy you put out and your attitude really does have an effect, because I think there's nothing else that irritates someone that's irritated than you not being irritated with them. That whole crabs love company or whatever, misery loves seafood or whatever it is. And it's just like, you can really affect the people and situations around you just by being a better version of you.
Mm-hmm. I think it is something that is always going on in the background of our operating system. That desire, yes.
Keep them on. There you go.
So I think that's one of the reasons why I really start with brutal focus. And I call it brutal because sometimes it can feel a little painful to actually focus and really let go of like, oh, everyone's doing social media, but I'm not sure that's actually my best method to sell for my business. Like,
I would say
it's
for
okay.
most people, it's not.
No, I would agree with you.
100%. The biggest companies I know and the CEOs I've had on the show, you look at their social, they look like they just started last week and they're doing 7, 8, 9 figures.
So right. And yet it's really difficult. I've talked to a number of people who would ask or say like, oh man, I feel so much pressure to do social media. And social media could be the tool for you. But the point is not to accept it by default, but to actually think through like, is that a priority channel to raise visibility, or can I sell through it? How do people buy in my space? It's just understanding what role it plays for you. I didn't do any social media for the first 10 years of my practice. That just wasn't my sense of
And
how.
clearly you're doing okay.
Thank you. It wasn't how people bought the kind of like found the relationship, the coaching relationship that they were looking for. Social media wasn't the go-to place. Now, there are other benefits to it and ways that it can raise visibility, but it's really that idea of knowing what's the purpose, what's the role that these priorities play in not your dream, but your kind of statement of like, where are you headed? What do you want? So I think that starting with clarity is one of the biggest benefits that I think I help people with first.
Yeah, for sure. Because all of these things, I've been making jokes and stuff about the wake up and there's stuff to do. Like that's the reality. It's the same thing like when you're planting vegetables and stuff. Like if you don't do anything, there's going to be weeds. The fact that you woke up in life today, thank God, but there's negative. It's a negative world, and unless you combat it, you're running uphill just by nature. So, one of the things I like to do is go, is this something I need to be doing? Hosting this show?
That's a great question. Yeah.
Probably something I should do. But if it's the other 58 things that would no doubt fill up 40, 50 hours of my week, probably, you can delegate that to someone else. So I love what you're saying about the clarity and the focus and the fact that you're helping people through it. I'm going to ask you one more question and then we're going to thank our sponsor. But thank you so much for explaining the clarity and everything so far. So, because I think too many people just go out, do stuff, like especially social media. I'm trying to behave, but it sounds like I think through. What I'm hearing is think through it, decide for yourself. Don't just parrot people because everyone's doing it.
Exactly.
All right, yellow or black?
Yellow.
Really? Okay. Oh, you got a good question. See that?
Awesome.
If not this, what else would you be doing?
Oh, great question. One option was I would have been a transplant surgeon. That's where I was headed before this. I also could totally imagine myself going up. There is a cat skiing lodge up in Canada that I love. The owners are these amazing people. I would train and become a ski guide for them. That's the first thing that comes to mind as something that would be incredible. And but
That sounds like fun, and I'm
yeah.
not surprised with the transplant surgeon. That's phenomenal.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to thank the sponsor and come back for the imperfect action round. Every business needs a book, including yours. Visit freebusinessbookpublishingcourse.com today to learn the 7 steps to publish and promote your nonfiction lead and profit-generating business book in 8 weeks. Once again, that's freebusinessbookpublishingcourse.com. And we are back with the imperfect action round. Carla, are you ready to take imperfect action?
I'm ready. And I love that. I love what you call this section. That's such a great phrase.
It's what I've lived by. I really have, as far as business is concerned, I started my first one when I was 12. I have like no college degree or qualifications or anything. I just was like, I'll figure it out. That's been the whole, I could sum everything up to just keep trying.
I love that. That is an inspiration.
I think you're the inspiration. You're helping all these people with all your knowledge and sharing it, and you have clarity. You're saving them years and decades. It's one thing to go, yeah, I'll figure it out, but it's another thing when it takes 5 times longer than you want it or need it to. So we need both.
We need both.
First question. See all the questions that we were going over beforehand. What was number 7? I don't know. What's the fastest path to the profits?
Oh, I have a strong thought on this, which is in business, there is making stuff and selling stuff. And I think usually it's lack of selling stuff that causes the biggest problems. So in my life, it was send more emails, like connect with people, reach out, build relationships, just keep going on that part. So
I love that you differentiated it. There's the sales and there's the fulfillment. And if you have a bad product, that could also be it. So,
of course, but
thank you for
often
saying that, because most people just, oh, we need to sell more. I'm like, your whole thing's busted. No one's going to buy that. Plus, the way you're doing it's wrong. But, okay, I'll behave. Don't want to. Number 2, what is the biggest problem you see your prospects making and the fastest way for them to fix it?
I think this relates a little bit to that fuel topic we were talking about, but I see people trying to cram things into unrealistically short timelines versus asking the question of, if I give myself some more time, how can I like compound my way and have this be a journey that is both enjoyable, goes farther, and is more effective because I didn't cram it into like a sprint timeline.
Okay. Awesome. Number 3, what is the best way to maximize customer lifetime value?
I think in my business, but I think in many businesses, it is to really do stand-up work, both the work, but also like oh no, be really funny. Yeah, I wish. But no, to like really like stand out work, like just and to be a person who is irreplaceable as a person. I just think people want to come back to that.
You might sell the company, but you can't sell you.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. What books would you recommend for Expert Authority World that have helped you in business or life?
Recently, like within the past year, I think the best 2 books I read were 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals, which sounds like a productivity book and was written by a productivity sort of journalist, but it's actually more of a philosophical discussion of how we view time as human beings, and how if we change how we view time, a lot of our productivity woes go away. And the second book is called The Formula, and it's by Barabasi is the last name of the author. And he was a social scientist studying networks who took his process to study success. And the punchline is that in areas where objective performance is difficult to measure, we really need to think about how our network perceives our performance, not just what we're actually producing. And I think there's a lot of really important learning for entrepreneurs and even people within big companies about making your work visible. Don't expect that it's obvious to people, all the great stuff you're doing.
Excellent. Where would you like people to learn more?
So a great place, if you're interested in performance science and just love hearing more of these conversations, LinkedIn is a great place. So I'm at Carla-Fowler. And then if you're interested in learning more about coaching, the best place to go is my website, and that is thaxa.com, THAXA. And there's great FAQ section. All my media is there, but also if having a discussion about a possible coaching engagement, what that might look like, is of interest, you can message me through that site as well.
I got to ask, where'd you get the name Thaxa?
Oh, Thaxa is related to the word for a task in Latin. And from the time I was very young, I think I understood that like big stuff was just a bunch of small stuff put in the right sequence. And that
Ooh.
if you look at the small steps, they don't seem as hard. And I think this is how I approach a lot of the big stuff I've actually accomplished in my life. It was like, if it was running a marathon, it was like, okay, do the next mile, then see how you feel. But it's really that stacking of steps on top of each other. And so for me, philosophically, I think that's how I approach things with clients. I help them break that down. I help them, hey, remove this little bit of friction. Hey, let's remove this little bit of friction. How does it feel now? Okay. But it's not some massive effort that we sprint through. It's all those little things that we line up. And suddenly down the road, you were in a place where you never thought was possible. And so that's why it's called Thaxa.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you're helping people. I've dealt with coaches, helped a lot of them publish books and stuff over the years, and I'd say they're the good ones. But I've seen coaches and stuff, and some of them it's just like, why you're really trying to guide people. I have no doubt you're a good one. If you're listening to this, check out her site and reach out to her. She's absolutely going to help you. And Carla, thank you so much for everything you've shared. I've enjoyed it thoroughly.
Thank you so much, Mario. I've enjoyed it as well.
All right, Expert Authority World, we have another great episode here today. I'll see you on the next one. Have a great day.